I was having a ponder about this, and I suppose you didn't ask me to sum it up in one word, and I don't wish to be reductive about it, but I ended up with the notion of flexibility. I think for me, that is really, if you have flexibility in your mindset, in your approach, which for me is, the ultimate ally of creative thinking, then you have inbuilt resilience. I think where business owners butt up against something and fail is it's not gone to plan, which 9 times out of 10 it doesn't, and yet so it doesn't match your plan. But your plan is written down. So you're just going to keep rinse and repeating until something changes. And often the only thing that will change that dynamic is you. And if you can't be flexible enough to change, it's not going to end well.
What is the link between creativity, great ideas, and resilience? Well, it's funny you should ask. You didn't ask. I know it was me, my voice I heard, because my guest today is all about that creativity, about coming up with that next great idea that is going to make such a huge difference to your business or your team. Her name is Jodie Newman from the Business Allotment. And Jodie is all about helping you use creativity to out-idea your competition. We're going to be talking about her business, what she does, why she does it, and the lessons about resilience, about business, and about leadership from the 20 years of running that business. It's also a really fun conversation. We had a great time recording it, and I know that everyone in the audience is going to have fun listening to it. At least I hope you are.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Jodie, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Great to have you on the show. Interesting conversation about resilience incoming, I'm sure.
Let's hope so. It's great to be here and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, and thank you for stepping in at the last minute when somebody else dropped out. Much appreciated.
That's all right. Always on the subs bench.
To kick us off, tell the listeners a bit about yourself and your business and what you do, why you do it, how you got there, etc.
Wow, okay, that's quite the opening question. So I run the Business Allotment, and it's the place where businesses grow creatively. I've been running it for about 24 years. So obviously over that time, apart from plague, we have done plague, not pestilence, but I've seen most things in business up until this stage. I mean, I'm 20, but as David will attest, I look 108. It's not always been an easy ride, but it's been a fantastically kind of interesting and a very exciting one at times. So in essence, I help businesses grow by using creativity, by applying creative thinking and all that amazing kind of approach of looking at things differently, finding new perspectives, and making growth kind of a creative challenge. And I help all manner of businesses. I work with a lot of creative businesses because they kind of come in, they go, okay, I get this approach. This feels like home, and being asked to do some slightly kind of off the wall things doesn't faze them. But I also work with a lot of professional services businesses who at first fit, the allotment, I would hope, is a very, very creative environment to work in. And then you get lots of accountants and IFAs coming through the gate and you're like, what are you lot doing here? This is curious. But in fact, when I look to a man and a woman, the business owners who come through the door in those kind of industries are ones that want to, in some small or large way, disrupt their industry. They want to tell a different story. They want to do things differently. They see a better way, but they often don't know how to achieve that. And I think, that whole creative approach is so useful when you're trying to do something different like that. So as I say, I've been doing that 24 years. I've done a blend of idea generation in that time. So I would work with clients like Dorothy Perkins, The Telegraph, Yahoo, ITN, go in and run what I would call quite traditional idea generation sessions. Now it's more about working with the smaller business owner, because I find that's the most kind of exciting and fast-paced way to get ideas off the ground. And they're generally more, up for taking a bit of a calculated risk, which you have to do when you're dealing with creative ideas. So that's the kind of shape of the allotment. I run a membership club, the Business Shed. So that's monthly kind of ideas and support. And I work one-to-one on all manner of business challenges with my clients. I do a lot of brand story, helping people stand out with a great story. But it could be working on a launch, working on how do we onboard our customers in a really exciting and on-brand way, and kind of everything in between.
Nice. And I have to say the background is very on brand as well.
Yeah.
Is that, I assume it's a real plant and not a plastic one?
It is. It's a fishbone cactus. She never existed till I found it. It's good because it's almost unkillable.
Yeah, and for the shed aspect, I feel like you need the row of tools with all the outlines drawn on the wall.
Yes, they're one of those pegboards. Yes, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. The creativity aspect, I'm not a particularly creative person, or at least I don't think of myself as one. And I do find it fascinating how people who are so good at that.
It's so interesting you reframed that statement almost immediately. So I'm not creative. Well, I don't think of myself as creative because, as I said before we came on the pod, I'm doing a talk called How to Out-Idea Your Competition. And within that, I do talk about this fallacy that there are creative people and non-creative people, because there's some research that came out a while back from the Harvard Business School. There is a small amount of inherent talent, however you want to phrase that, kind of, genetically predisposed to, or nurture, I don't know, but most of it is a skill. And like all skills, it can be practiced, it can be taught, it can be learned, it can be shared, it can be improved upon. And that's why I'm not an ideas person as a response to anything I ask anyone, because we generally tend to have been educated out of our creativity, and mostly the workplace also doesn't help. So we end up in this very binary world where there is a right answer and a wrong answer, and not a lot in between is tolerated, because it's difficult to process that out, and so in the ever, kind of relentless pursuit of effectiveness and, kind of best practice, it's difficult to engineer creativity into a business. It's very, very possible, but people don't know how to do it. So they kind of circumnavigate it.
I much prefer the way you talk about it as well, as opposed to the way most people view it. So talking about it in the context of ideas, because creativity, the traditional assumption is creativity means you're good at art or some sort of, that creative and inverted commas side of it. But actually, it's not just about that. It's about the way you think about things, how you come up with ideas, innovation, all of those other things.
Yeah.
So people like me maybe are better at it than we think we are.
We are all better, and we can all be better creative thinkers, and we are all better at it. Bearing in mind that, as and this comes to no surprise to anybody, because we all kind of vaguely remember being kids, and also most of us are around kids at some point. They are the creative ninjas of this world, and so we all have had it. So we just need to kind of tap into it and then hone it. And kind of that's where I work with, my clients, because it's all there. It's all there. And if it's not about, sitting on a windswept hill, smoking a ghoul whilst waiting for your muse to strike. That idea of creativity, sure, it has its place in the world of the artist. In the world of business, there is a little bit of a process you can apply, and there is definitely a toolkit of techniques that you can use. And even the best creative thinkers think in the same territory, and you need those kind of forced routes of thinking to jump outside the territory you usually think in to get to new ideas. And that's kind of my role with my clients, is that I force them to think about things differently. Sounds more painful than it is. Honestly, David, it is quite good fun.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't sound painful. It sounds good fun. Yeah. I identify with the whole way that business and education kind of programs this sort of thing out of us as well. And it's, I don't know, is it because of an efficiency thing? Because I see parallels there to leadership and management as well, like the approaches that we've traditionally come to expect in the workplace, and how any alternative is kind of hammered out and just not seen as the right way. There's that professionalism word that I detest as well.
Yes, well, I think paddling around in creativity probably exposes what I would call the sort of traditional approach of leadership, exposes any kind of weakness that people have about relinquishing power. Because I think the best leaders relinquish power in so many ways and do it, gladly. And I think creativity is one of the biggest kind of democratizing factors. And you've got to be big enough to know that you're not going to necessarily be the most creative person in the room, despite having CEO or MD or whatever written on your business card. This does not give you a gateway to creativity. I was running a session, it was some time ago now, and I always like to have what I call fresh eyes on a problem, on a business challenge. And I was facilitating an idea generation session for a pitch for a marketing agency. And I invited the security guard to come along because he has fresh eyes. He's never thought about this potential client before. I'm sure he didn't know the mechanics or the hierarchy of what was going on in the group. One of the ideas he came up with won the pitch. That's what I mean by creative democracy. And I think as leaders, you have to be willing to embrace that. And the other thing you've got to make really good friends with is failure. That's not traditionally seen as something you want to be associated with. And I think we've got a language problem, because if you reframe it as iteration, it becomes a little bit more palatable. But failure is part of the creative process. You have to stare it in the eyeballs and get comfortable with it, because the more novel an idea, the closer it will probably be residing to utter failure.
Yeah, I see that very closely related to realism as well, personally. I think, expecting to never fail or seeing failure as a bad thing lacks a real realism and understanding of how the world actually works.
Totally. And I think you can mitigate against failure by playing it as safe as possible. But that, from a business perspective, where really ideas and that sense of creating something that's innovative, that is not playing it safe, because otherwise it will be an idea that has been regurgitated from somewhere else that you've seen sort of work. So you're doing a little kind of twist on it. That's not innovative. That's not going to get your business somewhere fresh. That's going to get you somewhere where your competitors have already been. And that's why I talk about out-ideaing your competition, because you need to be doing things that are very on brand, very creative. That is setting that business apart.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think creativity in that context is basically what you've just said, but it's that competitive advantage, isn't it? And it's totally, I think it's about more than even about the idea generation itself. It's about the way you think even, isn't it? And we could talk about examples of well-known companies that have really done that very well, and seen ridiculous success as a result. And I think it's all tied together with like the leadership approach, the way that you treat and support your people as well, creativity, attitude to failure, all sorts of all of these things. They're all like many sides of a weird spherical coin or something. Yeah.
Yeah, totally that. It is that. It is that. And I think there are lots of facets to becoming an organization that encourages creativity. And there are some super simple steps, and then you can just keep layering up those things. But for me, it will start with that more attitudinal thing that will come from the top, and it will be the permission that everyone can contribute ideas, because that's your creative capital. And if you're not tapping into it, my God, you're missing a commercial trick, because a lot of creativity comes down to perspective, and the thing you lose at the top is any other perspective than a top-down view. And I often talk about with smaller business owners, we all have this, inside-out knowledge of our business, which is fabulous because you can run it without having to kind of rethink everything every day. It's that kind of, day-to-day stuff. But that inside out is a terrible perspective of creativity. Outside in is what gets you the fresh thinking and the new perspectives. And it's the same with sitting at the top of a business. You will have a singular perspective. And what happens is you can either open the doors to other perspectives and ideas, or you can close them. And that's a leader's choice. But opening that up and then actually putting a little bit of kind of what I'd call creative infrastructure in place, so idea pipelines, plumb those straight in, and also hire on the skills that you want in terms of creativity. I mean, LinkedIn run this kind of most wanted soft skills and hard skills poll frequently, and creativity is always hanging around those top 3 spots. But it's still, I find, most organizations don't actually know how to then get the most out of their creative capital. All those amazing brains, all seeing things from different points of view, bringing other perspectives into the business. I mean, when someone joins a business, it's like they've never worked anywhere else mostly. And I worked with one business where we created a database of knowledge and ideas from their staff, that the database pretty much stops when they join, because they know that bit. What they really want to tap into is, I once worked with this brand, or I once worked here and I implemented this, or I've got this idea from when I worked here. And you're that's what you're paying for, all that stuff. It's amazing how often that's not utilised.
Yeah, I mean, it's like GCSEs and A-levels and degrees, isn't it? They're only useful until you get to that next stage.
That's
and then
right.
No one ever mentions it again.
Exactly that.
Yeah, it touches on, so we talk about the myths of leadership quite a lot on this podcast, as you can imagine. I think one of those that seems really relevant to this context is this idea that the leader has to know the answer. Like that's the role of the manager or the CEO even, is to have the answers to every problem. And I think this is part of the problem when we come to talking about things like innovation and creativity and generating new ideas, because if your mindset is, I'm the CEO or whatever, I'm the owner of the vision, the grand plan, I know all the answers, or I have to know all the answers, then you're going to get stuck really quickly, because the pressure you're putting on yourself is immense in that situation.
Yeah, totally.
And B, it will lead you down the path of not listening to anyone else's ideas.
Yeah.
At which point, why have anyone else there? Just do it by yourself. Right?
Yeah, totally that. And I've seen it, and I have done a lot of facilitating of idea generation sessions, because what tends to happen otherwise is either the loudest mouth or the most senior person in the room holds in the old days, the flip chart marker, and they have the control. And, you can see it play out where someone junior will have an absolute humdinger of an idea, and it won't get past the flip chart marker onto the board, because, it doesn't come from them. And when I do these kind of sessions, I will ask the group after a couple of hours, we've done, there's maybe 400 ideas up around the room, and I will ask them to pick 3 ideas that they feel, kind of is exciting or kind of potentially fit the brief, etc. And I will only allow them to pick 1 idea that they came up with themselves, which forces them into picking other people's ideas, because, we have given birth to that idea. It's our little baby. Like any baby, we don't see how ugly it is. We think it's wonderful. There are no faults to it. And that's, exactly as you said, David, is what happens when leaders don't listen to other perspectives, and acknowledge that people from all areas of that organization will have incredible insights and ideas.
Absolutely. And also, as you were alluding to earlier as well, like the further up you get in that hierarchy, the further removed you are from what's actually going on at the coalface, or insert other analogy here.
Totally. Yeah.
So how can you be expected? Like, it's not reasonable for you to know those answers, because you're so far away from it and it's not your job anymore. So why, unless you're one of those really proactive leaders who walks the shop floor every day and talks to at least 2 people in every department or something.
Yes.
Which is great if you've got the time to do that. And and I absolutely encourage it. But even then, you're not going to get that depth of knowledge.
No, exactly. And so there are lots of things you can do as a leader. And I think it's, this is for me where the competitive advantage is really going to show, because I think, where we are processing and systemizing everything, and yeah, we're going to plug AI in here and do this thing, and oh, look at us, we can do it quicker, faster, better, cheaper. It's sort of a bit of a race to the bottom, as we know. And instead, can we do it more excitingly, more engagingly for our customers, and more creatively? And that will set you right apart from everybody else.
Yeah, and the AI is a great example of that, isn't it? Because, I feel like the customer service representatives say the person at that particular coalface knows full well that the customer doesn't want to deal with a bot or a machine. They want to feel that human connection. They want to feel like someone actually cares about their problem and is trying to help.
Yes.
And so it's a case, isn't it, as linking it back to that business efficiency and the race to the bottom. It might save you a bit of money in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to cost you customers.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I'm not anti-AI. It has a place. I mean, not for true creativity, because it just scrapes other people's ideas. So there's a whole IP can of worms there. But I think in terms of, automating stuff, and I've done it in my business because that's the only way you scale. However, for me, automating certain elements of the customer pathway it is so that it allows you to free up time to think about adding in those really genuine, what I call seeds of delight. So that whilst, yes, okay, it's frustrating, having an automated email come out to tell you this thing about X that you do need. And whereas before it might have been a lovely email directly from David's inbox. And it's like, hey, how you doing? So you're missing that bit, but you're replacing it with something really drenched in your brand and your approach, and something that really creates an impact for customers. I think what I'm seeing at the moment is a lot of great, let's make it super efficient and slick, and like the client whizzes down this pipeline, but nothing, it's frictionless. Nothing stops them in their tracks. Nothing makes them smile. Nothing makes them feel cared for. Nothing makes them feel excited or safe or anything. It's just literally this kind of dead process that, you're kind of all marching through. So I think for me, there is that application of creativity to any customer experience. So how do we make this ours? Because if we can make it ours, it's distinctly ours, and our customer recognises it as such and loves us for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wonder, it's going to be an interesting few years, isn't it, with the AI and which bits it takes over and how far it all goes. I feel like some of that we're seeing at the moment, where people are kind of rebelling against it and they don't want AI answering their phones or whatever, is just a reaction to that. And I've had a few conversations with AI experts and people who know way more about it than I do, who are suggesting that in a few years' time, like, it would be indistinguishable from a human, and that maybe that customer experience, for example, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Yes,
and I don't disagree with that. And again, I know pretty much zero about AI in any depth, but if we are getting to the stage where that interaction is you can't tell it apart, then maybe we can design creativity back into that interaction, because it's not at the moment. It just, if you go onto a bot or anything, it's designed to make you furious within about 89 seconds. That feels to me to be the brief at the moment, because, if you deviate off of the pathway it's been programmed to deal with, you are in all manner of, hellscapes. But I do think that, like a little bit like, any industry, you will have those that churn it out and they love the utilization of tech. When you're thinking about buying a pair of jeans, okay, yes, you can get one from, any mass producing jeans brand, and it looks fine and it's okay, and the brand experience is okay. Or you can pay through the nose and get an experience like none other and go to Hyatt Denim, who just make a certain number of jeans in a year from a factory, which is kind of family run. They build the story around it. They make you fall in love with the brand. You don't mind spending £250 a pair of jeans, because you are buying something that no other brand can replicate. So I think, as always, people will innovate their way to either be right in the center of an AI solution, which gives slick and efficient processing, and they will stand apart from it and go, do you know what? We've got a better story to tell than this, and we have definitely got a better experience to give our customers. So it'll become a choice.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Come on, David, keep the faith.
I'm sceptical that it will ever get to that point, but I don't know enough about it, so it's uninformed skepticism.
Well, I've got uninformed optimism, so we're a good two sides of the coin here, David.
Yeah. I mean, my usual argument, and maybe this is biased and I have to say this because otherwise what am I doing in my business, is that anything where like that personal interaction matters, I don't feel like AI can replace that individual. So leadership is a classic example. I feel like customer service should be an example, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Only time will tell, I suppose.
Yeah, it's difficult. And this isn't a chat about customer service. I appreciate that, but I wonder whether there is. I think for me, what it needs to get smarter at is understanding the initial problem, because I imagine why people think it's okay to put a bot in front of a customer is because, let's say, making it up as I go along, 80% of customers have a really dumb-ass question that if they'd gone onto the website, they could have answered. So the bot's there to scoop up that stuff, which is because that's there is a question around why the customer doesn't know, because it's not the customer's fault. That will be the business's fault. But anyway, that to one side, if you've got a whole swathe of customers with really obvious questions, it does kind of make sense to automate that in some way. But what you want to do then is tick their boxes, because they'll toddle off very happy because the bot's giving them exactly what they need super quickly without having to wait 15 minutes. Our call is important to you, but we still make you wait 15 minutes. That thing, which we also hate. It'll be an efficient way of dealing with that. I think the smart will come when they can quickly identify who's in the 80% of dumb questions and who is the 20% of customers who've got more complex needs that need solving, rather than go round 82 different bots who equally cannot answer their question. Can you tell I've been onto my bank recently?
Yeah. So, I mean, one example I've had recently where it worked quite well in that situation is where it gives the customer that choice, that decision. So It always has that speak to an operator equivalent.
Yes.
So you can self-select if you know it's a complex question and you suspect quite strongly, probably with evidence, that the bot won't be able to solve it. Then you can immediately hit that button and go straight to a person.
Yes, I have done that before and ended up with another bot, which
Oh, interesting.
was an interesting plot twist that I was not up for.
No, this is not what I signed up for. Yeah.
That's okay.
I guess the counter argument is there's quite a lot of those call center type approaches where it's just people following a script anyway, at which point you're probably not getting. I mean, we've all had those conversations. Banks are a good example, 100%, totally. Where it doesn't matter what you say, they're going to read the next three things on their script.
Yes, absolutely.
At that point, it might as well be a bot, frankly.
Yeah, and I think, this is intrinsically the problem with being a customer versus being the business, is that customers, we would love to be the only customer. I want to feel like I'm the only customer. So I want, to pick up the phone to the CEO and voice my concerns, but I don't want to pay as if I'm the only customer. I want to pay as if I'm a trillionth customer, so I get the best deal possible because you're sending something in volume to me, but I want to be treated like the only customer. And it's that dichotomy that businesses have to try and deal with. If you're scaling and dealing with 1 million customers, how do you make them feel like they're the only one? It's tricky.
Is it even possible? I don't know.
Yes, I'm not sure. I was hoping we'd move on at that point and just leave that question hanging in the air.
No, I mean, I don't know if I want to feel like the only customer. I'd like to at least feel like I'm taken seriously in some of those conversations.
That would be a good start, wouldn't
it? Yeah. And that would be enough for me. I'm not,
I'm just being greedy, David. I just want to be the only customer.
Amazing. So, resilience then. We are doing a series this month, as you know, about resilience. Yes. That's why you're here.
Yes.
I think quite a lot of the things we've already talked about can feed into this in terms of the resilience of a business and its longevity.
Yes.
But how would you define that word resilience to start with? And then we'll go from there.
So I think for me, I was having a ponder about this. And I suppose you didn't ask me to sum it up in one word, and I don't wish to be reductive about it, but I ended up with the notion of flexibility. I think for me, that is really, if you have flexibility in your mindset, in your approach, which for me is, the ultimate ally of creative thinking, then you have inbuilt resilience. I think where business owners butt up against something and fail is it's not gone to plan, which 9 times out of 10 it doesn't, and yet so it doesn't match your plan. But your plan is written down. So you're just going to keep rinse and repeating until something changes. And often the only thing that will change that dynamic is you. And if you can't be flexible enough to change, it's not going to end well. So I think for me, it has to come down to flexibility.
I like that. It rings bells for me as well. I've been, as a business owner, as a co-founder in a previous company as well, I've traditionally been quite bad at this, because you start that business to do a thing, whatever that thing might be.
Yes.
And it's probably because you're quite passionate about it, or you know a lot about it, you really care about it. You can see what you see as a gap in the market or a problem that a customer somewhere will need solving. And once you've got that idea in your head, when it starts to not work, it's so difficult to be like, okay, maybe I need to drop it and find a different thing. And I'm very bad at that. I'm getting better, I hope, but it is challenging, especially in those sort of purpose-driven companies as well.
Yes, it is challenging. I think there is something about, you can retain the ultimate purpose, the ultimate mission, but the path to get there may well change. And I think it may be because you see an opportunity and build a slightly different path, or it could be, and as I said, right at the start, having done this for sort of 24 years, I've seen most things. So my path has changed numerous times because of small things like a financial crash, which took a 6-figure business to pretty much nothing over the course of about 2 months. So, regardless of whether I wanted to stay on the path I was on, and I could have probably happily stayed doing what I was doing pre-financial crash of sort of 2008-9 for the next couple of decades, quite happily, the market thought differently. My client, my sales pipeline, because I was doing ID generation, I was paid out of either a marketing budget, biz dev budget, or R&D. They were the first buckets of cash to shut. And so my clients, we still want to use you, but we cannot pay you. So, and without the flexibility to go, ooh, okay, now I'm here. I didn't design to be here. Let's face it, I don't want to be here, but I'm here nonetheless. So there are always choices and there are always options. And it's having the flexibility to go, okay, so what do I keep hold of? And what do I change? And if you have that options thinking, so if you have the flexibility to think divergently, like here's a challenge, let me think of 20, 30, 100 ways I could solve this, and then make a decision about which idea is going to serve me and my business best. If you can do that and have that flexibility of thinking, you can navigate your way through. If you've got the one idea and you're clinging to it like a life raft, and that life raft is deflating before your eyes, there's only one way you're going to go, and that's down, submerged.
Indeed, yes, up the proverbial creek.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Side note, isn't it funny that when times are tough economically, companies cut things like marketing and PR and the sort of thing that might generate business, usually quite a long time before they even think about maybe mentioning the idea of cutting, say, executive pay, for example. It's weird that, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't imagine what agenda that's serving. Yes, and I think, it's the old adage that, those who spend through the recession come out of it in a much stronger place. Of course they do, because if you are communicating, as regularly as before and, et cetera, you are going to win, the hearts and the minds of those customers. So, yes, it's always an interesting place to be.
Yeah. I mean, same argument for things like staff development, training, leadership development.
Yeah.
Redundancies as well is the other classic where, yeah, it's a weird one.
It is. But, and I think there's never one right way to do it. But I think having that, that whole kind of curiosity, the exploring of options, the not racing to a decision, there is a slight time factor involved with creativity. And I think, it's kind of engineered out of us because we need the right answer. We need it now. And and as I think traditionally leaders are seen as these really highly decisive, I'm going to make the decision within 3 milliseconds. I'm going to stick to it regardless of any evidence that then comes across my path. And we've all seen people like that, and, and what can happen when that doesn't work out for them. But, if you've got that flexibility, if you take a breath and you just have that patience, we're not talking about not making a decision. We're talking about allowing that option thinking. Let's think divergently about this. What if we did something crazy? What if we did a really wild idea? What if we did something that we've never done before? What if we did something surprising? Asking all these creatively open questions, I think helps you explore every avenue, and then you can evaluate and move forward with the best idea.
You've hit upon another myth of leadership there about the definition of decisive. I think that's misunderstood. A lot of leaders, a lot of people generally think being decisive means making a quick decision. I've never seen, not never, it's very rare that a quick decision results in the right outcome. A quality decision, on the other hand, that to me is what being decisive is about. Sometimes that does mean taking your time, considering the options, gathering multiple ideas and points of view, and so on and so on.
Yeah. And it's a real strength of a leader to do that, to kind of elicit opinion and listen. These are all really underrated skills. But I like that term that you just used, David, quality decision making. And I think that's what we strive for. But I think there is this kind of urgency, particularly if you are in a dire situation. I came out of the marketing industry after working in it for about a decade. I got a job in a training agency, and they made me redundant on my second day because they'd lost a big client. And they were a boutique training agency. And that was her knee-jerk reaction to the news overnight that she'd lost one of her biggest clients. I totally get it. It was quite a while ago now. I'd literally just put my Rolodex on my desk, so I packed it back up again and off I went. And she hired me back as a freelancer for about 6 months, which cost her a lot more money than keeping me, and it's though we all see them, those knee-jerk panicked decisions because she felt she had to do something rather than take a breath and, look at different perspectives and what if we did this? What if it, So, yeah, we've all seen those decisions made in haste.
Definitely. And I think the other side of it, which you also mentioned, was having made that quick decision, then refusing to change it, no matter what evidence you're faced with that maybe it was the wrong decision. Being decisive doesn't mean never, ever again changing your mind. Yeah, there's the other extreme where you change your mind every day, and that's just being fickle. Here's
a new initiative. I was like,
exactly,
God.
like the latest shiny object.
Yeah.
But there's a middle ground where it makes the most sense from both directions, and I think
I agree.
Not enough time and effort and thought is put into that in a lot of situations.
Totally agree.
You've mentioned already some of the big issues like the financial crash. Obviously, the pandemic's a big one as well.
Yes.
There's been quite a few economy depressing, if not breaking, moments in the last 20 years and when you've been running your business. So, how do you deal with setbacks like that whilst also maintaining that healthy sort of optimism that I think is key, especially when you're in a business of one?
Yes. So I think there are so many different ways you can do it. And I think I lean heavily on my own creativity to explore, okay, here's now the situation, which, it can happen overnight. So, there was talk of some weird virus coming out of a different country, and then suddenly my children are both at home and need educating, and that all happened within, a kind of a week. And so it's about remaining open and flexible. And I think for me, that is going to be a key thing. I think also it's about having sounding boards. It's about having built a community of support around you, which is so important, particularly when you are either on your own at the top of an organization or you are in an organization of one, as you say. Things can get pretty damn lonely. And to have these people around you, and not necessarily, one of my kind of main touchstones of kind of emotional support is a friend. They're not in business themselves. She's a teacher, but I know, I can offload to her and vice versa, and she will also reflect back some of the stuff that's being said, which is, I think, useful. I also have an accountability partner but it sort of goes beyond the notion of accountability. Again, she's very good at asking those questions and challenging what I'm saying in a really nice way, so you don't feel under attack. The last thing you want when you're trying to educate your kids and run a business is someone being really aggressive and asking you loads of questions, picking holes in your logic. But those safe spaces where you can go, this is absolute, insert swear word here, what am I doing? I can't see my way out of this. And then you talk about it. And I always think that mechanic of just talking about it to someone else, sometimes they don't need to say anything. It's, we have a mental load as business owners before we even factor in family, parents, all other things that we need to do with our lives. That mental load is a constant whir of stuff we're trying to make sense of, prioritize, deal with, etc. And I think actually just saying them out means that you change your physical relationship to them in a weird way. They are first internal, and then you speak them out, and they're in front of you. And already you have a different perspective on what you've just said. And I think sometimes being able to say them out loud, see it all out there, then you can start to kind of pick apart and go, okay, I can see now what's going on here. You can't turn your eyeballs around and see it in your head. You can see it when you say it. And I think that's, in itself, to have someone who allows you the space and time to do that is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think sometimes, even just the fact of mentally getting ready to say a thing, it makes you think about it a bit more before you express it.
Yeah,
and that can be helpful as well, I find.
Totally, because I think I'm not I don't know what goes on in the brain, but you don't necessarily you kind of feel the problem. You can mull it over, but in order to say it out, you kind of have to structure it, because you've got to use language, which is a structure. And at the point you've done that, you've already, as you said, started to corral it into a shape. Whereas before it was kind of just this sort of fog of stuff. So, I'm a big fan of having, and I meet, to this day, my accountability partner every week. I mean, I see her more than I see my husband. And she's more useful. I didn't say that. It was just a joke.
Do you want me to edit that out? Because I'm not going to.
Well, I could have said my kids. That would have got me even worse trouble.
It would, yeah. Yeah, potentially. I mean, I guess it doesn't work for everyone. Some people are verbal processors, I'm told. I guess it's still going to probably work, though, isn't it? It's just it will take a few more words to get there, probably.
Yes, and I think as you probably I'm a big kind of talker outer, and I think as long as the other person respects, I have clients who say very little, but I can watch them processing nonetheless. They're checking in with it kind of kinesthetically, and they're like, oh, what do I feel about this? And so, as long as your sounding board gives you the space, I do it with my kids, and my youngest is constantly talking about all the zillion things he's concerned about. And at the start of any conversation, I will clarify with him, do you want me to suggest some useful stuff, or do you just want me to listen and be next to you while you're talking about it? And he'll do whatever, he'll reply in whichever way feels right for him. I think, again, we're kind of programmed to, I must fix this, especially as business owners. God, we're such brilliant fixers. Sometimes we don't need to fix the other person. We just need to kind of soak up some of their stuff, let them vent. It's all sound and fury. And then they kind of blow themselves out. And then they go, okay, I feel this is great. I know where I'm going now. And you've done nothing, but you've done everything.
Yeah, it's the different approaches to being supportive, isn't it? And I mean, I love that dynamic of asking at the beginning, like, what do you want my role to be in this conversation for you?
Yeah, and because I think in a work situation, we are always, it comes, I sound really like a coach and I'm not, it comes from a good place. But, that kind of, I can give you 3 ideas to fix that. That's not what they maybe have come for. They've come for something else. So I always think, just ask them, what do you want from me? What can I do? The same way as I always ask clients, what's the best way for me to communicate with you? Do you want it via email? Do you want to do it over phone? Yeah, I mean, if they're under 25, they look at me like I'm an idiot. What do you mean talk on the
What's
phone?
a phone?
But, I think we always assume the way we look at the world is the way everyone looks at the world. And what you learn very quickly, particularly when you work in a big organization, is no one sees the world like you. And that's your strength. That's your creative take on everything. But it also means that why not ask and be clear about what, a manager wants from their manager or a staff member wants from their, team or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned business owners and being really bad at that and just wanting to fix everything. I think the same is true for most leaders and managers as well.
Agree.
Again, like something I was terrible at when I first started doing it. Just as soon as somebody expresses a problem they're struggling with, immediately, well, I've done this before. Here's how you need to, and they probably didn't want that. They just wanted me to say, okay, let me know how I can help, or something like that, or if you want help.
And you're doing it from a place of, let me share my knowledge, let me share my expertise. This is all hard won. I'm gifting this to you. But what it robs them of is the ability to have that autonomous thought process where they go, and again, it's quite coachy, but well, what would you do? If you couldn't ask me what, and you had to do something, what do you think you might do? And I think that is how you build autonomous people in your organization, which is only to everyone's benefit. I think those people who insist on giving you the answer do not want to build autonomy into their organization, because then you've got to tolerate all sorts of people doing things in a way you don't like, but gets the job done just as well, if not better.
Yeah, absolutely agree. You get overexcited that you know the answer, or you want to show off that you know the answer.
Totally that. Yeah. Totally that.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, if you want a truly autonomous team where everyone is efficient and effective and doing the best work they can do, that's never going to happen if you constantly give them all the answers. It's a form of micromanaging, really.
Totally.
Maybe not to extremes, but
yeah. No, I completely agree. And it's kind of like, yes, you build a team, you need to lead them, but actually I think if you can make them autonomous and you make them creative and make them able to kind of pretty much go with whatever comes across their desk or the situation that the team find themselves in, and they support each other, then you become less of a leader and more just as of a cheerleader. You're the vibe maker of that team, and you're there to catch them when they do fall. But otherwise, you should be building that team to, excel without you.
Absolutely. That last bit is the real trick of it, though, isn't it? Is doing all of these things in a way that they know if they really, truly do get stuck, something does go massively off the rails.
Yes.
The leader is still there to help.
Totally.
And they're not just going to go, well, hang on, no, it's your problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You fell into my trap. I have nothing to do with this. Yeah.
Well, you wanted autonomy, so sorry. It's another one of those fine lines to walk. But I mean, to me, leadership has always been about creating the environment for success, for other people to succeed.
Yeah, totally.
And that will obviously change, and you've got to be a bit flexible and a bit adaptable to the context, to the environment, to the organisation. It will be different in each case, but a lot of that, I think, is to do with what we're talking about now, is how you support people without doing their jobs for them, basically.
Yes, and I think also, knowing that some people were only destined ever to pass through your organisation. I mean, I had a guy in my team who, he was absolutely brilliant, and, he did the job supremely. He could have done my job supremely. And I sat down with him and said, how do I help you leave this business? Because there's nothing here that really utilizes the talents that you've got. How do I help you? Because I think you should leave. I mean, I did not want him to go, but I couldn't give him the experience of a role where he was using all of his supreme talents.
Yeah, and that's the kind of leadership that makes people want to follow you, I think.
Well, he left, so he didn't.
Well,
but
for other reasons,
he
though,
followed
right?
me.
Like, for other reasons, yeah. We've talked a lot about leadership myths, or I have. What are some of the myths about running a business generally or staying resilient that you'd like to debunk?
So I think, and I say this because I hear this from so many young businesses. So I run the Startup Shed once a year, which is sub 2-year businesses. We go through a program of stuff to help them put all those kind of growth stones in place and help them think creatively about the business they want to build. And I get from them so much around, like, what is the way I do this? I'm like, no, there isn't a way. And I think there is this myth that there is a way. And I think we have all bought into that myth, regardless of what element of running the business it is. You know, there is a way to do marketing. There's a way to onboard clients. There's a way to do this. There's a way to do that. And I think they struggle with it because often that way has come from often sort of the corporate business world and has been kind of shoved into a small business kind of learning box, but it's completely over-engineered. But it's the sort of prevalent way of doing it. So everyone does it that way, and then they wonder why their business looks and feels like everybody else's business. You know, we are kind of just doing these things without thinking about it. And I talk about these. Assumptive thinking is the biggest creativity killer. And for me, if you can uncover the assumptions we make about the way we run business, you are onto a winner. That's where the creative wellspring will kind of come forth, because, you know, it could be something really small like, okay, I'm going to do a newsletter, which, you know, is something I've heard most business owners at one point say, because someone's told them they need one. So, you know, there is a way to communicate, so I will do the way. And then they go, oh shit, I'll do a newsletter. Right, so off we go. So they go, okay, so I'll do it via email. And I say this in full knowledge that this is what I've done, right? Or right, send it out via email. I'll do it every month because that's the way happens. You know, everyone does a monthly. So I'll put some news in it and I'll make it about my business. Okay, great. I mean, it's like literally every newsletter that ever got, you know, spewed forth into the ether. And then you wonder why kind of only your mum and your hamster have signed up, because it looks and feels the same as every other poor, sorrowful newsletter that, you know, lived. And I think if you can understand the assumptions you've made, then you're not starting your thinking halfway down that thinking route. You will start it at source. So when you say, I mean, let's say it is strategically needed. Let's put that aside, that you've actually done the strategic thinking. And you go, right, I definitely want a newsletter. Think of the assumption that you will first make about it. Okay, that it's on email. Okay. And we all know the reasons why it's good to have it on email. Also, that makes them the bad reasons as well. So, okay, I don't send it by email. Maybe I'll send it by mail. Old-fashioned postal mail. Okay. And then you think, well, maybe I'll send a letter. And you think, well, hang on, that's an assumption. Yeah, I have to send a letter. What if I sent, you know, an origami swan? What if I send an A1 poster once a year rather than, you know, doing it monthly? And all of a sudden, I'm not saying any of those is right, although I would quite frankly love to receive an origami swan. And I tell you what, no one would ever bloody forget it. You know, so in terms of branding and brand awareness, you know, this is where creativity wins every time. But you are not starting from an assumption that means what you do is like everyone else. So for me, that kind of, if you can nail down hunting out those assumptions, you will land somewhere else. Because if you say, well, I'm assuming my newsletter has to have words in it, and then you kill that assumption, then what does that leave you? Well, you could do something cool. You could do like a photo story. You could make it illustrated. You could do an infographic. All of these things are more interesting than most of the newsletters I get in my inbox. So I think for me, that's the exciting part of me. That's where I work with my clients, is, okay, who's made the rules here? We've just assumed the rules. Let's unassume every bloody rule and start our thinking again. And I think if you can get that, you will build a business that is more resilient, because you will stand out. Customers will love you for it. This is where delight and that customer bond comes in, because you're creating something so on brand. That's why I often start with brand story, because you've got to understand what the experience you're trying to elicit first off. And then you can do something amazing. And, this does not mean you spend millions. It means you get creative about it. I worked with a client in the PR industry. She was after a specific set of clients within the wine industry. And she tried emails, nothing really stuck. So we handmade like 20 or 30 corks. We hand stamped her logo on it. We had a little funny strap line. We sent them out. She got 5 conversations out of it that she would never have got sending an email. That's where the power of creativity comes into its own, and that's where it builds a business. I'm not even sure that answers the question you asked, David, but I went off down that path anyway.
Yeah, I think it sort of did. Yeah. The newsletter point is definitely well made. I've always struggled. I've started a few of them over the years, and I struggle to keep going with them because I just get bored of the writing process.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm getting bored writing it, who's even reading it? I'm just not going to do this anymore.
Yeah. And you think, and I do think there is something to be said. There is one kind of line of thought that says, the things you're crap at, just persevere and get better and train up, and no one's got time or energy for that because the motivation isn't there. So either, again, it's all about choices. Well, if I refuse to write my own newsletter, what do? Either you outsource it or you don't do it and you do something else instead, because strategically, it's not about writing a newsletter. It's about keeping your prospects and customers in your universe. And there is a lot of other more creative ways to do that than chuck out a turgid newsletter where every word is typed through gritted teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it's true for everyone, but I've always been much more consistent and I think better at things that I enjoy. And so, that's why this podcast is still going, touching on 160 episodes now. This is my newsletter, I guess, effectively.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Because I love it and I love these conversations, and it doesn't feel like work.
No,
I think finding that,
exactly.
whatever that is,
yes,
for you, for your business, for your team, whoever you are in the audience, that's the key.
Yeah, totally agree. Agree.
Awesome. Well, I'm slightly conscious of time, so I've got 1.5 more questions for you.
Okay.
The one is the one that everyone has to answer. It's not optional. It's leadership heroes.
Okay.
Leadership heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, that could be anyone you can think of, like dead or alive, past or present, real or fictitious, but it has to be someone who you think perfectly embodies leadership. So who would that be for you and why?
Yeah, this is difficult. First of all, I trawl back through my career, which is basically littered with terrible leaders and terrible managers, which is why I ended up running my business. So I came to the conclusion, and I don't know him very well, but I have met him, is a guy called Joe Glover. I don't know whether you have come across him. I think he runs it with another guy, James Sambrook. But I first came across Joe, and he runs the Marketing Meetup. And I first got wind of him, I think, during lockdown, and they were putting on these free events, Zoom events, where marketeers and associated industry peeps could come along, listen to someone talk. And that wasn't the start of his business. I think it started pre-COVID. But I've kept a very beady eye on it. I've gone to dozens and dozens of these sessions. They're all free. They're all amazing. I have a fantastic roster of speakers, and I've watched him organically grow this community in a way I've not seen anyone else do before. And I think for me, Joe, I don't know very well, as I said, but he's a very kind of humble and very nice guy. The whole vibe of the marketing meetup is positively lovely. That's their brand line. And they are those two words in complete alignment as human beings, particularly Joe, who I know better than James. And he wouldn't call himself a leader, I can pretty much guarantee it, because there feels like way too much ego involved with that word. But I would call him a community nurturer. And I think that's what he is. And he does it like no one else I've seen. And every little touch point, so he has a jobs board, but you have to, if you want to advertise, you have to put a salary on, because he knows that it's just not advertising salary. It's the tiny things, and everything they make a decision on is to serve the community, not them. And they've built this amazing business out of it, and they've grown it organically. It's not been this aggressive. Oh, I'm opening the doors. It's now, 60 quid. I'm shutting the doors. Membership open, membership, all that kind of stuff. It's just so tiresome. It's very much an organic growth supported by the community, and I think he embodies a lot of what a modern leader should be about, which is about building a spotlight and stepping straight out of it.
Oh, I love that visual. Yeah, I mean, that's spot on though. It's that the community aspect I love as well. I think the really great leaders, they're the ones who build these communities around whatever it is that they're doing. So that's a great example for that alone. I'm not aware of him. I am going to go and look him up now. So thank you for that reference as well.
My pleasure.
Yeah, great choice. We've not had him before either, so bonus points. Well done.
Oh, very pleased.
Okay, and then the half question is, anyone in the audience, I'm sure by now, have loved listening to you. They want to learn more about you. They may even want to come along to the allotment or the shed or both.
Yes.
Where can they go? What's the links?
So the website is the place where you'll find everything, which is thebusinessallotment.co.uk. In there is the tool shed, which is a free to join online membership where you just can plunder my shed of resources and tools, loads of creative tools, loads of stuff around brand story and strategy, the whole business growth piece. So everyone is very welcome to sign up there. And there's also the tool rack, which is my monthly newsletter, which I do enjoy writing, I have to say, because I am a bit of a writer by heart. It does have words in it. I haven't taken a dose of my own medicine, but you get a little sound track. You get a little track of the newsletter, so you can listen to a related bit of music while you're reading it, and hopefully it'll make you smile. And it's always got an exclusive little tip or a tool in there to help you grow your business, be more creative.
Lovely. And I'll pop that link in the show notes as well, so everyone can find it easily. Well, Jodie, thank you again so much for being with us. I've loved this conversation.
It's been great. Thanks for inviting me on, David.
Went off on some great tangents, which is always more fun. Yeah. And we'll have to do this again sometime, I think.
I'd love
we didn't cover hardly any of the questions.
No,
did we?
No. So. I will keep my notes and we'll go for pod B maybe at some point.
Yeah, maybe later in the year. Let me know when you're free.
Amazing.
And have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, David.
Massive thanks again to Jodie for your time today. Loved that conversation. I learned loads about creativity as well that I hadn't really thought about. So it's given me a new perspective on that too. And I just know that everyone in the audience has learned loads from it as well. So if you are a business owner, an entrepreneur, an aspiring one, or a team leader, a manager, and you're feeling stuck when it comes to creativity, you want to be able to grow your business or your team using that power of ideas, then I absolutely recommend hitting that link in the show notes. Visit Jodie's website, sign up for the allotment, take a look in the tool shed. There's loads to learn, and I know that you won't regret it. And that pretty much concludes our mini-series on resilience. And if you are a new or struggling leader, a first-time business founder, you're growing a team, or you're facing some sort of people-focused challenge in your business, company, or organization, do come along and join my online leadership community. It will help you get the most out of your team, be a more effective and engaging manager via better leadership skills. The website to find out more is www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. Hit that green button, sign up to the community. There are multiple membership tiers now available, more to be learned on that website. Hope to see you there. And of course, there will be a calendar link there as well if you'd rather have a conversation with me before you sign up for anything. Speaking of which, my LinkedIn details are also in the show notes, so you can drop me a message on there as well if you prefer. Well, that's all from me today. I hope you'll join me again next week, because in the first episode of the month, I'll be speaking with someone whose business has had a profound impact on this podcast. In fact, it's fair to say we wouldn't still be here without what his company does. We'll also be bonding over a shared career history from the aerospace industry. He's got some amazing lessons about leadership, some unique perspectives on starting a business as well. So it's not an episode that you want to miss. His name, of course, is Alex Sanfilippo, and he's the founder of a company called Podmatch. So don't miss that one, especially if you are toying with the idea of starting your own podcast as well. All that remains for me to say is, of course, thank you, listener or viewer, for being with us today. And as always, be a leader, not a boss.